Hey, welcome guys. In this video, I will show you how to create a ECS Faregate cluster. But before I get into creation of Faregate cluster, let us understand the concept of Faregate. So, Amazon came out with this concept called serverless, where ideally you don't have to manage the backend infrastructure. Okay. So what is this when I say you don't have to manage the infrastructure? So let me quickly draw a picture and then show you what it is all about. So you all know that with a service called EC2, you provision our VMs, like number of instances depending on the requirement, and each VM we define size, example extra large, right? Maybe double extra large. So depending on your requirement, you will be selecting the size, and what you run inside these instances, ideally Amazon doesn't care about that, right? So this is what is happening when you go with your ECS EC2, meaning you take one EC2 instance or you provision two EC2 instances, and then inside them you create n number of containers, assuming you have resources for those containers to run. Amazon is not charging you for the amount of resources these containers are consuming. So at the end of the day, you will be paid or you will be charged only for the EC2 instances. Okay, and as part of that, management of these EC2 instances, meaning high availability, right, patching, vulnerabilities, blah blah and all, is all our responsibility. So we as a clients of Amazon, or since we are provisioning our own services, we are responsible of managing those EC2 instances. Okay, so there are certain limitations and there are advantages with this approach, but Amazon came out with the concept called Faregate, whereas in the Faregate the concept would remain the same, but only difference is that we do not manage our EC2 instances. Okay, we only create containers, and let's say if this container is using 1 GB memory and maybe 1 CPU, so you will be charged for the amount of resources a specific container is using. And how about the backend instances? The platform on which the containers are running, the resources, the patching, updates, it is all taken care by the Amazon. Okay, so again, there are pros and cons with Faregate as well, and okay, there's a lot of documentation available out there. I'll try to put those documentations in the description section. Depending on the requirements, depending on the applications that you are using and the approach that your client wants, you can choose either of these ways. Okay, so I have already shown you how to create an EC2 instance, but now I'm going to show you the Faregate block. So let's get started. So we are already in the console here. Okay, and I'll go ahead and create a cluster. So click on create cluster, Faregate, and the cluster name. Mastering Cloud Faregate demo. So I mean, not only in this service, guys, like any other service that you get across EC2, like within AWS, right? There are options for you to create a dedicated VPC for a given cluster or for a given component, or use an existing one. So I do not want to use or create a new one. I would like to use an existing one. So I'm not selecting this option. Name, Mastering Cloud Faregate demo. Would you like to have insights for your containers? Yes. And then create. So if you observe, like EC2 cluster creations, you will not get the option of selecting what instance you want, what AMI, or which subnets and all. Okay. So because in the backend, Amazon maintains those infrastructure, that infrastructure in the backend. So our cluster is okay. So if you look here, our cluster is created, it's active. Now go ahead and create a task definition. So on the left hand side, click on task definition, create a new task definition, and ours is a Faregate. Next, and the task definition name, I'm going to call it Mastering Cloud TD, probably task definition. A role. So again, this role is for allowing our containers to talk to other AWS services. And if you observe, networking mode is only one AWS VPC. So in this case, every container will get its own unique IP address. And our family is Linux. Role, I'm using the existing role. And memory, I would like to give 0.5 GB and this many CPUs. So Amazon will be charging you for this, like 0.5 GB of memory and 0.25 virtual CPUs. This is what Amazon is going to charge you for, because we do not pay for EC2 instance here. We pay for the amount of resources our containers are consuming. Container name, Faregate, and I'll go with Nginx. So there are soft and hard. So it's like, guys, restricting amount of memory your container can use. Basically, that is what these restrictions are. Let's say if I say the hard limit is 2 GB, right? So it cannot use beyond 2 GB. If I say soft limit is 2 GB, it can use 2 GB and it can use the available memory on the host on which it is running. Okay, I'm not defining it. Port, this is a web server, and if you want, you can define all of these things. So currently I do not have any of this requirement. And you see this log configurations. I'll try to create another video on CloudWatch logs, but for now understand that all the logs, right, the container logs, the Faregate logs and everything, you will find it in the specific log group. I'll show you this, but the concept behind these log groups, how they are generated and all, I'll try to create another video. So this all looks good, and say add. So our Faregate container is ready with image Nginx, and that's all. I do not want add any volume. Like if you have like EFS is Elastic File System. I'll create a video in this series and show you how do we integrate a EFS with our containers. Okay, so for now I'm not adding. So use all the default settings. I think everything looks good. So say create. So our task definition is created for our EC2. And if you see here, there is an option. This is a builder where we are using our AWS management console to build it. But in automations, you can straight away use this JSON file. Like usually in the production environments, we maintain this file in our GitHub. And every time you want to do some modifications, you just change those given entries and then you provision or update the task definition. Okay. And our task definition is ready. So go to your cluster. Now let's go ahead and provision our containers. So if you look at the tasks, we do not have any tasks here. Okay, so because there is no service yet, let's go ahead and create a service. And our launch type is Faregate. Operating system is Linux, and you can see the task definition Mastering Cloud TD, and the version is 1. Platform version latest. Cluster, we have only one cluster. Service name. Service name MC service 1. Number of tasks, I would like to have 2 containers, and the given health checks. And the deployment types, rolling updates, blue green. I'll also create a video on this as well, blue green deployment. Okay, because that's really important. So as a DevOps engineer, you need to understand how this deployments are happening without any downtime. So blue green is a very popular deployment both in ECS as well as Kubernetes as well. Okay, I'll try to create a video on that too. And the tags, would you like to propagate? Nope. And next. So again, here is an option. Would you like to use an existing VPC? Yes. And select the subnets. Okay. So usually when you are provisioning your instances or infrastructure, right, we might not be using all the subnets. Okay. Ideally we use 2 or 3, and depending on the requirement. But in my case, I don't know in which subnets my instances are running, so I'm selecting all of the subnets. And the security group, it is creating its own security group. You can see, if you want, you can add another rules. Okay. And auto SN public IP, yes, enabled. So I'm not using a load balancer here, and everything looks good. Click on next. It's an optional again. I do not want to define any auto scaling parameters. So tada, that's all. Let's create service. So our service is created, and you see within no time they come into this state which is running. So in some interviews, guys, people will ask you what are the states, right? Provisioning or creating, pending, running, stopped, right? These are the container states. See, now they are running. So how do we access them? Just click on the tasks, you see, and you have your private IP and public IP. So I'm going to select the public IP and put it in the browser. So it should show you Nginx page. See, so we have successfully provisioned our Faregate cluster, and we have provisioned our container too. So the beauty with this Faregate is that, like I said, you do not have to worry about the resources, right? Like sometimes there could be high intensive applications running in a container, and they might need memory, right? Maybe during peak hours it might need more memory or CPU, and the normal time it won't use that amount of memory. So if it is a EC2 instance, you will have to provision the higher capacity instance, and those resources might not be utilized during the normal time. So with Faregate, you have that ability, right? So at any given point of time, you are charged only for the amount of resources your container is consuming. So again, there are pros and cons. I'll try to share some links through which you will be able to understand the differences better in EC2 and Faregate. So let us also access the other container, get the public IP and then put it. So if you have a load balancer, you can attach load balancer, and then the load balancing will happen on these two containers in the backend. So that's all, guys. And looking at the logs, here are the logs that we have created. And let me also show you the log group, right? Like if you open your, I'm opening another window, go to CloudWatch. So on the left hand side, you have your log group. And here comes your all the logs for the Faregate that you have provisioned. See, Mastering Cloud demo, Mastering Cloud Faregate demo, and you get to see all the logs here. So even if you remove your services here, right? So the logs are still available in your CloudWatch. So you don't have to enter into the containers in order to understand or get the logs. So you can use this CloudWatch logs for all your, it acts as a centralized system for all your logs within your given cluster. So yeah, that's all, guys. And I'll try to show you how do we integrate EFS, Elastic File System, with our ECS cluster, okay, in the next video. Thank you. Okay, and before I log off, and I'll also show you how do we terminate our cluster, right? The ideal way of terminating cluster is that first you need to stop your task definitions, right? And then ideally, if you have any services, try to remove the service. I'm deleting the service. And then finally, delete the cluster. Done. So your cluster is created. Your cluster is deleted. Okay. So thank you all. See you in the next session.